Coming up on Primetime News, the death toll continues to rise from the MERS outbreak in Korea, but the government seeks normalcy. Thousands of schools across the country reopen while special measures are put into action to prop up the economy. And as the two Koreas mark the 15th anniversary of a historic inter-Korean summit, Pyongyang says it's open to talks, but only after certain conditions are met. Korea's Inbee wins her third straight women's PGA championship, leaving no doubt that she's the top player in women's golf. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello and welcome to Primetime News on this Monday, June 15th. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And I'm Daniel Che. Thank you for joining us. We start with the MERS outbreak in Korea. It's still showing little signs of slowing down, unfortunately. And 5 more cases have been confirmed with 2 additional deaths.
And for details, we go over to Laah Hyun-kyung at the news center. Hyun-kyung, what's the latest on this crisis?
Well, as of this Monday, the number of confirmed cases stands at 150, with the death toll rising to 16. Now, more than 5,000 people are currently quarantined, while some 2,500 people have been released after testing negative or showing no symptoms for the maximum incubation period of 14 days. Now, 5 cases of Middle East Respiratory Syndrome were newly confirmed today, and of those 5, 3 caught the virus from patients with tertiary infections. This is raising concerns about the further spread of the disease, but because it's not spreading outside of hospitals, thousands of schools reopened on Monday after staying closed last week. Students' temperatures were checked at the front gate of many schools and in classrooms, and teachers warned the students to frequently wash their hands. This follows the World Health Organization's recommendations, as fortunately no transmissions have been detected in schools so far. Some 450 institutions still remain closed, though.
And Hyun-kyung, today President Park Geun-hye talked about the need for a systematic response team as well.
That's right. This was at a meeting with her senior secretaries this morning. She said it was important to have a permanent response team set up so that the country can prevent foreign diseases from spreading in Korea in the future. Have a listen.
일시적 운영에 그칠 것이 아니라 상시적으로 감염병 대응의 핵심 기구가 될 수 있도록 제도화시켜서 질병과 감염에 대한 보다 완전한 시스템을 구축할 것입니다.
Now, the president also stressed that minimizing the negative effects of the MERS outbreak was as important as containing the virus. She urged the business community to resume their activities and encouraged Korea's overseas missions to spread the word about the government's efforts to contain the virus and ease any anxiety about traveling to Korea.
And the government is obviously doing everything it can to stop the spread. Today, the Prime Minister's office dispatched a resident task force to Samsung Medical Center in southern Seoul. Could you give us the details about that?
Sure, Ji-hye. This comes after the center announced on Sunday that it will suspend non-emergency services until June 24th. Now, after all, Samsung Medical Center is one of the main hospitals under fire for poorly handling one of their MERS patients who has now become a so-called super spreader. 2 other hospitals in Seoul announced temporary partial shutdowns earlier in the day. They include Korea Cancer Center Hospital and Borame Hospital. Now, Keonyang University Hospital in Daejeon also started a temporary partial shutdown after one of its nurses tested positive for the virus. Fears are also spreading in the southern port city of Busan. The city said this afternoon that they have 2 confirmed cases with nearly 1,000 people suspected of having MERS. A task force was sent to Busan today after it was found that one of the 2 patients had contact with nearly 780 people at a handful of hospitals and small clinics before being isolated early this month. Now, that's all I have for now. Back to you in the studio.
All right, thanks for that report, Hyun-kyung. We'll have more on the latest developments as they come. And the impact of the MERS outbreak is expanding, even changing people's shopping habits, sending them online as they try to refrain from stepping outdoors.
Well, that's good news for internet retailers, but concerns still linger over the toll the viral disease will take on the economy. Our Kim Ji-hyun has this report.
Koreans are increasingly going online to shop for necessities, largely due to concerns about the MERS virus. Lotte Mart says its online sales from June 1st to the 11th increased around 27% from the same period last year. It also reported a near 62% rise in online orders during the same period.
The MERS outbreak may have played a role in the sharp increase, since we didn't engage in any promotional events during this period.
To keep up with rising demand, Lotte Mart says it added 100 delivery vehicles and dispatched some 150 people for home deliveries last week. E-Mart Mall and Home Plus say they've also experienced a boost in online sales and are coming up with similar plans for faster delivery. Still, concerns are rising the MERS outbreak will take a heavy toll on consumer spending as people refrain from outdoor activities. Cinema visits were down 52% this month through June 11th, while in-store sales in major department stores have dropped more than 5% from June 1st to 6th from the same period last year.
Poor handling of the MERS outbreak could kill the recovery momentum of the Korean economy, which is already struggling from a downward trend in industrial output in April and falling exports.
Just last week, the Bank of Korea trimmed its interest rate by 1 percentage point to 1.5% in an effort to minimize the impact of the MERS outbreak on economic sentiment. Kim Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
And on the country's fiscal front, Korea's Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan says a decision will soon be reached on whether to draw up a supplementary budget to address the country's economic woes.
And speaking to lawmakers at the National Assembly today, the minister said a final decision will be made by the end of June after analyzing economic conditions. There have been mounting calls to pump more money into the sluggish economy, which is suffering even more in the face of the MERS outbreak.
Choi added that while the economic impact of the outbreak has been minimal until now, it could pose a major threat if it continues.
And along with the fight to contain the MERS outbreak, the Korean government is battling another kind of contagion, public fear.
That's right. Schools are closing and people are secluding themselves, despite assurances from authorities that the situation has not reached an alarming level.
And according to one expert, this reaction is normal and the government should do more to address it. Our Son Jung-in has more.
Paul Slovic, a renowned professor of psychology at the University of Oregon, says the Korean government should not disregard what they perceive as disproportionate public panic over the MERS outbreak, but should respect the reaction. In an interview with Seoul's Yonhap News Agency, the risk expert explained that a relatively unfamiliar disease like MERS can quickly stoke instinctual panic regardless of the statistical risks because of a fear of the unknown. So in one respect, he says, it is natural for people to feel an excessive amount of fear of the invisible deadly virus. He added that health authorities should pay closer attention to the public and share with them the correct information about the situation in order to reduce the amount of unnecessary anxiety. He cited the example of tuberculosis, which is a more contagious and deadly disease, but people are less fearful because they're familiar with it and more aware of how to prevent it. Slovic advised that one way to win back trust and reassure the public is to dispel any doubts about the disease by hiring reliable medical experts to answer questions that they have, instead of merely releasing instructions for people to follow. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Rival parties ended a standoff today over a contentious revision to a parliamentary law and sent it to President Park Geun-hye for final approval. The agreement came as both parties agreed on changes proposed by the National Assembly Speaker, but whether the president will sign it into action is in question. Our Ji Myung-gil reports.
National Assembly Speaker Chung Yu-ah sent the final version of the revised National Assembly law to the cabinet for President Park Geun-hye's signature on Monday. Chung said it was unlikely the president would disapprove the revision since some of the wording was changed to eliminate any potential constitutional violations. They were proposed by the Assembly Speaker last week in an effort to mediate political clashes over the law and possible opposition from the presidential office over its constitutionality. Earlier today, the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy cleared the way for the law to move forward when it agreed to soften some of the wording used within the legal text. The law now states that the Assembly can request instead of demand changes to government ordinances, including those made by the executive branch. Ahead of this breakthrough, President Park had threatened possible use of her veto power to block the law on the basis that it could encroach upon government policies and paralyze state affairs. The ball is now in the president's court. She will have 15 days to either sign or reject the revision submitted by Parliament. Kim Young-gin, Arirang News.
Also at Monday's secretaries' meeting, President Park asked officials to seek ways to develop the bilateral relations with Tokyo ahead of the 50th anniversary of normalized ties between the two countries later this month. She said this is necessary in addition to efforts to resolve the outstanding issues between them, such as Tokyo apologizing for the Japanese military's coercion of Korean women into sexual slavery during World War II. In Tokyo, Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga refrained from commenting on President Park's recent interview with the Washington Post, in which he said Seoul and Tokyo had made considerable progress and are in the final stage of talks on the sex slavery issue. Suga added Tokyo has not changed its position that the matter was settled when the two sides agreed to normalize relations 50 years ago. And as Korea closely watches what words Prime Minister Shinzo Abe uses in his address in August to commemorate the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II, Abe said today that the statement will include remorse over Japan's past wartime atrocities. This came in an interview with Hong Kong's Phoenix TV. Abe emphasized that Japan has been sharing historical views of former prime ministers like Yohei Kono and Tomiichi Murayama, who both made landmark apologies over the war. He also said that the country's new security law will not lead to any military conflict with China, adding that he will continue to work to improve relations with Beijing.
Let's look into Korean relations now, marking the 15th anniversary of a historic inter-Korean summit. North Korea says it has no reason not to hold talks with South Korea. Our Hwang Sung-hee reports on Pyongyang's response and some expert analysis on the sincerity of the regime's gesture.
North Korea says it is open to talks with South Korea under the right conditions. In a statement carried by the state-run Korean Central News Agency on Monday, the North said there is no reason for the two Koreas not to hold dialogue and talks if an atmosphere for trust and reconciliation is created. It laid out some preconditions for dialogue, such as an end to the annual joint military exercises conducted by Seoul and Washington. The North's remarks coincide with the 15th anniversary of a landmark inter-Korean summit between former South Korean President Kim Dae-jung and then North Korean leader Kim Jong-il. The summit produced the so-called June 15th Joint Declaration, outlining inter-Korean reconciliation and economic cooperation. South Korea also called for dialogue to mark the historic anniversary, but raised questions about North Korea's true intentions.
In our government's assessment, North Korea is stressing the June 15 Joint Declaration in words, but acting in the opposite way. We once again urge North Korea to actively create a mood for inter-Korean dialogue and cooperation according to the Joint Declaration.
Still, some experts view Pyongyang's latest statement as a positive development.
Since North Korea has put the ball in South Korea's court, future developments will depend on the South's response to the proposal.
But others remain wary about North Korea's intentions, noting that the statement came just a day after it test-fired short-range missiles into the East Sea. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
A North Korean soldier in his late teens defected to the south earlier today. South Korean authorities say the soldier has walked across the DMZ, which is the heavily guarded military demarcation line between the two Koreas. Our Won Ji-hyun has the story.
It was around 8 o'clock Monday morning that a young soldier from North Korea was found on South Korean soil. An official from Seoul's defense ministry says the 19-year-old soldier had walked across the inter-Korean border on the eastern side and ended up in Hwacheon, Gangwon-do province. The incident raised tensions on the border as South Korean soldiers prepared for a possible confrontation when they saw the North Korean soldier making the crossing. Although the soldier had crossed what's known to be one of the most heavily militarized zones in the world, the authorities said no artillery fire was exchanged during the incident. When the soldier reached a guard post on the southern side, he expressed his will to defect. He was then handed over to South Korea's National Intelligence Agency for investigation.
The North Korean defector is being questioned by authorities regarding his motives and process of leaving the North.
The young soldier reportedly told authorities that he wanted to escape the harsh reality of life in North Korea, which included regular beatings. This was the first time in nearly 3 years that a North Korean has crossed through the land border to get to the south. After further investigation, South Korean authorities said they will release more details about the young defector on Tuesday. Won Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
North Korea says it will return 2 missing South Korean nationals who illegally entered the north. According to Seoul's Unification Ministry on Monday, Pyongyang plans to repatriate the 59-year-old man surnamed Yi and a 51-year-old woman surnamed Jin on Wednesday morning through the truce village of Panmunjom. The two had been traveling in China before they went missing near the China-North Korea border on May 11th. The South Korean government said it was investigating their whereabouts but had not made any requests to the north. 4 South Korean nationals still remain detained in North Korea.
Now, after a series of ruthless executions of top military officials, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is now focusing on beefing up the regime's military capabilities. Our Han Da-eun has the details.
The anti-ship rocket has drastically increased our Navy's maritime operational capacity. Those were the words uttered by North Korean leader Kim Jong-un after a test of the regime's latest surface-to-surface anti-ship missiles. According to the state-run Korean Central News Agency Monday, the drill was conducted recently by the Navy's 597th Combined Unit with Kim in attendance. The specific date of the drill is unknown. The KCNA said the, quote, ultra-modern anti-ship rocket flew at a guided altitude and hit the bullseye on target, praising its accuracy. Kim was reportedly very satisfied with the drill, saying it displayed the formidable power of the North's military. The report comes a day after the North fired 3 short-range KN-01 missiles into the East Sea. While going all out to beef up the state's military capabilities, Kim Jong-un also appears to be busy rearranging the military leadership. Speculation is high that a 4-star general in the Korean People's Army, Park Yong-sik, may have been named as Pyongyang's next defense chief to replace purged defense minister Hyun Yong-chol. Park's name came just after that of Hwang Byung-seo, the current #1 in the North's military, in the KCNA News report on Kim Jong-un's attendance at a military arts event. Pundits also say the fact that Park's name came just before that of Lee Yong-gil, the chief of the General Staff of the Korean People's Army, could be another sign that Park has risen to become the next defense chief. And then, Arirang News.
Moving over to the world of sports, Korea's Park Inbee has written herself into the history books and regained her world #1 status with a resounding victory in her 3rd straight KPMG Women's PGA Championship. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
Korean golf sensation Park In-bee showed off her skills for a record-breaking win. The 26-year-old shot a final round 68 on Sunday to finish the tournament at 19 under par at the Westchester Country Club in New York, taking home the winner's check of $525,000. She finished the season's 2nd major 5 strokes ahead of fellow Korean Kim Se-young. Park is the 3rd LPGA golfer to win 3 consecutive Women's PGA Championship titles. The other two title holders are Patty Berg and Annika Sorenstam. With the victory, her third this year, Park will also reclaim the #1 spot in the world rankings over top seed Lydia Ko. Park began the year at #1, but Ko surpassed her in February. Now with 6 major championship wins to her name, Park has surpassed her idol Park Se-ri for the most majors by a Korean player and tied the tour record for the lowest score in a major in relationship to par. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
And for the top international headlines, we connect now to our Polly at the News Center.
Our focus today, emergency talks on Greece's debt crisis fall through, deadly floods strike Georgia's capital, and mankind's first comet lander comes back to life.
Paul, let's start with the Greek crisis, though. Athens and its international creditors have been locked in negotiations for months, and still they don't appear to any closer to a deal, even with a deadline just days away.
That's right. EU leaders are warning that the Greek government is yet again on the verge of bankruptcy after last-minute talks in Brussels failed to reach a much-awaited breakthrough. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras defied calls by European partners to return to the negotiating table on Monday. He said he would wait until the IMF and EU were, quote, more realistic. In response, an EU spokesman said major concessions had already been made.
Apart from the final negotiation scheduled for Thursday, an emergency plan, a Plan B, is important because from July 1st, Greece will fall into a state of emergency in the areas of energy, salaries for policemen, medicine, medication, and many more.
Meanwhile, Greece's stock market plunged after the crisis talks ended in deadlock. Athens' FTSE Bank's index dropped 12%, with the National Bank of Greece falling nearly 11%. Analysts forecast trading to remain volatile amid growing fears of Greece's possible exit from the euro. And staying in Europe, at least 12 people are dead after severe flooding struck the Georgian capital of Tbilisi, leaving widespread damage over the weekend. Rescue efforts were still underway as of Monday for over 20 people lost in the heavy rainfall. Scores of homes and vehicles were swept away, with the government estimating the recovery costs could reach nearly $18 million.
It's a great tragedy when you suddenly lose a family member. The mayoral office will provide financial assistance to address the consequences of the natural disaster. The situation is difficult, but it can be handled except for the fact that we cannot bring back those who died.
Panic erupted amid the disaster as deadly zoo animals were freed in the city streets after their cages were damaged. Tigers, lions, bears, and even a hippopotamus were among more than the 30 animals that escaped overnight. And finally, the first spacecraft ever to land on a moving comet has come back to life after it was thought to be lost in space for the past 7 months. Scientists at the European Space Agency said Sunday that it re-established contact with the Philae lander, which is hurtling through space at 54,000 kilometers per hour. The probe is believed to have regained enough power through its solar panels as the comet moves closer to the sun.
We got housekeeping data on the status, temperature, power as generated by the solar generator. So it appears the lander is healthy. It's operational, and we will work now in the coming days on getting longer slots, longer communication slots, and then we hope also to command again the scientific instruments and get more science from the cometary surface with the instruments.
Philae first landed on the large mass of ice and rock located more than 450 million kilometers away from Earth back in November. However, a failed landing left the historic probe trapped in the shadows of a cliff, dampening what should have been the climax of a 10-year space mission. And that wraps up our look at international stories for now. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Light rain fell over some inland regions on this Monday, while heavy clouds lasted throughout the day today. And for tomorrow, more sporadic showers are in the forecast. Between 5 to 30 millimeters of precipitation is expected, which could be accompanied by thunder, lightning, and strong gusty winds. But despite the rain, temperatures will continue to rise, and tomorrow will not only be warmer than today, but also more humid. And because of the heat and high humidity levels, the discomfort index will also increase. And by midday, many of you could feel stressed and bothered, so try to take it easy tomorrow. On that note, let's take a closer look at Tuesday's temperatures. Daytime high here in Seoul and Gwangju will rise to 30, and Daegu and Busan will top out at 27 and 24 respectively. And as for the other parts, it seems like Daejeon will top out at 30, while Jeju and Dokdo see a high of 25 and 22. Well, that's all for the weather. Good night.
The air conditioning is a little weak here today. What I wouldn't give to run into that water fountain right now. Well, that brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you for staying with us. This has been Daniel Choi.
And I'm Hwang Jae. Please join us at the same time tomorrow. Goodbye for now.